An Arab executive steps into an exclusive swing club, expecting nothing more than a fleeting night of passion. But one unforgettable encounter with a captivating couple changes his life forever. What begins as a daring romance spirals into a web of intense emotions, shocking betrayals, and a heart-wrenching tragedy you won't see coming. Before we start, tell us in the comments, what would you do if a moment of desire led to a lifetime of consequences? Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to follow more stories that will move, shock, and inspire you. Karim Al-Farid didn't believe in fairy tales. At 34, he was a self-made billionaire, a man who built an empire of luxury hotels with his intellect and sheer willpower. Yet beneath the polished exterior of the Arab executive, there was an emptiness he couldn't escape. Success had brought wealth, respect, and power, but not happiness. That's what led him to the Velvet Room, an exclusive swing club hidden in the heart of Manhattan. Karim wasn't there for love or connection. For him, it was a place to shed the suffocating weight of his carefully curated life. But this night would be different. This night would shatter the walls he had so carefully built and leave him vulnerable in ways he had never imagined. The Velvet Room exuded a quiet sophistication. Its intimate lighting and plush seating attracted the elite, those who could afford discretion and desired indulgence. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, his Rolex glinting in the dim light, Karim sipped his scotch neat at the bar, scanning the room with detached curiosity. And then he saw them. The man stood tall and confident, his athletic build evident even in the casual ease of his posture. His dark hair curled slightly at the edges, framing a sharp jawline and piercing green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His name, Karim would later learn, was Ethan Grant, a tech entrepreneur whose charm was as disarming as his looks. Beside Ethan stood a woman equally magnetic, with long auburn hair that cascaded over her shoulders and a playful smile that lit up the room. Her emerald green dress hugged her curves perfectly, its shimmering fabric catching the light as she leaned into Ethan with effortless elegance. She was introduced as Sophia, Ethan's wife, her energy warm and inviting. Karim wasn't one to stare, but there was something about them that commanded his attention. They weren't just beautiful, they were captivating, exuding a chemistry that was palpable even from across the room. As if sensing his gaze, Ethan's eyes locked onto Karim's. It wasn't a fleeting glance, but an intentional, bold connection that made Karim's breath catch. Ethan leaned down to whisper something to Sophia, and she turned to look directly at Karim, raising her glass in a silent toast. For the first time in years, Karim felt a crack in his meticulously maintained composure. He wasn't used to being on the receiving end of such attention. Against his better judgment, he found himself walking toward them, his pulse quickening with each step. "Hi," Ethan said smoothly as Karim approached, his voice as confident as his demeanor. "I'm Ethan, and this is Sophia." Karim nodded, his tone steady despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through him. "Karim, nice to meet you both." Sophia extended her hand, her green eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Karim," she repeated, her voice melodic. "That's a strong name. You don't seem like the type to frequent places like this." Karim allowed himself a small smile. "And what type do I seem like?" Sophia tilted her head, studying him. The kind who watches from the sidelines, waiting for something worth his attention. "Is that so?" Karim replied, his tone laced with amusement. "And have I found it?" Ethan's easy laugh broke the tension, and he gestured toward the plush seating in a quieter corner. "Why don't we find out?" The three of them settled into a rhythm that felt strangely natural. The conversation flowed effortlessly, fueled by shared wit and subtle flirtation. Karim found himself drawn not just to their physical allure, but to their dynamic, the way they complemented each other, balancing playfulness and sincerity in equal measure. It was intoxicating, and for the first time in a long while, Karim felt a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he was missing. As the night wore on, the connection deepened. Karim noticed the way Sophia's laughter softened when she leaned in to speak to him, and the way Ethan's gaze lingered just a little longer than expected. There was an unspoken invitation in the air, one that both excited and unnerved him. When the clock struck midnight, Sophia rested her hand lightly on Karim's arm. "It's getting late," she said softly, her voice carrying an unmistakable undertone. "But the night doesn't have to end here." Karim hesitated, his mind racing. He wasn't the type to act impulsively, but something about this couple made him want to abandon caution. He glanced at Ethan, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. "Where to?" Karim asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Sophia smiled, her green eyes shimmering with intrigue. "Our place." As they left the club together, the cool Manhattan air greeted them, carrying with it the promise of something new and unpredictable. Karim had no idea that this night would set in motion a series of events that would lead to both passion and heartbreak, changing his life forever. The ride to Ethan and Sophia's penthouse was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking for Karim. The couple's effortless charm and confidence created an atmosphere that was as alluring as it was intimidating. Karim, typically in control of every situation, found himself surrendering to the unknown. The black SUV glided through Manhattan's streets, the city's vibrant energy a sharp contrast to the quiet storm brewing inside him. Sophia sat beside him in the back seat, her emerald dress shimmering under the passing streetlights. Her laughter was soft and melodic as she exchanged playful banter with Ethan, who was behind the wheel. Karim felt the occasional brush of her hand against his arm, a subtle but intentional gesture that sent a jolt through him each time. Ethan, for his part, occasionally glanced at Karim through the rearview mirror, his green eyes sparkling with intrigue. When they arrived at their building, Karim was struck by its grandeur. The sleek glass facade reflected the city lights, and the doorman greeted Ethan and Sophia by name. They led Karim to a private elevator, which whisked them up to the top floor. As the doors opened, he stepped into a space that exuded luxury and sophistication. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, with the Empire State Building glowing in the distance. Modern furniture in neutral tones was accented with bold, abstract artwork, and a grand piano sat in the corner, its glossy surface reflecting the soft, ambient lighting. "Make yourself comfortable," Ethan said, gesturing toward a plush sectional sofa. "Can I get you another drink?" "Scotch, neat," Karim replied, his voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. As Ethan moved to the bar, Sophia joined Karim on the sofa, sitting closer than he expected. "So, Karim," she began, her voice light and conversational, "what's a man like you doing in a place like the Velvet Room?" Karim smirked, taking a moment to observe her before responding. "Probably the same thing as you, looking for an escape." Her lips curved into a playful smile. "Escape from what?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the directness of her question. "From the weight of expectations," he admitted finally. "Running a business, maintaining appearances, it can be isolating." Sophia nodded, her expression softening. I know the feeling, but sometimes it's in those moments of escape that you find what you didn't know you were looking for. Ethan returned with Karim's drink, handing it to him before taking a seat on the other side of Sophia. And what about you, Karim? He asked, his tone casual but probing. What are you looking for? Karim took a slow sip of his scotch, the liquid burning just enough to ground him. I'm not sure yet, he said honestly. But maybe that's the point, to stop looking and just see what happens. Ethan exchanged a glance with Sophia, a silent understanding passing between them. We like that, Ethan said after a pause, letting things unfold naturally. The conversation flowed effortlessly, the three of them weaving between light-hearted banter and deeper, more personal revelations. Karim found himself drawn to their openness, their ability to make him feel seen in a way few people ever had. The walls he had so carefully constructed began to crack, and he allowed himself to lean into the moment. As the night progressed, the atmosphere shifted. Sophia rested her hand lightly on Karim's knee as she spoke, her touch sending a thrill through him. Ethan leaned back, his gaze steady and unreadable, though a faint smile played at the corners of his lips. The air was thick with unspoken tension, each gesture and glance charged with meaning. Eventually, Sophia rose from the sofa, extending her hand to Karim. Come with me, she said, her voice soft but commanding. Karim hesitated, glancing at Ethan, who nodded in quiet encouragement. He took Sophia's hand, allowing her to lead him through the penthouse to a balcony that overlooked the glittering cityscape. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the warmth of the room, and for a moment they stood in silence, taking in the view. It's beautiful, isn't it? Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Karim nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. It is. She turned to face him, her expression unguarded. You're not like most people, Karim. There's something different about you. He met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. And what do you see? Before she could answer, Ethan joined them on the balcony, his presence grounding yet electrifying. He placed a hand on Karim's shoulder, his touch firm but reassuring. We see someone worth knowing, he said simply. Karim felt the weight of the moment settle over him, the boundaries between them blurring. In this space, with the city sprawling beneath them and the stars above, he felt a strange and unfamiliar sense of belonging. The city stretched out beneath them, glittering like 1,000 scattered diamonds. Karim stood between Ethan and Sophia, the cool night air brushing against his skin. The tension between them was palpable, the kind that didn't require words. For Karim, this moment felt like stepping to the edge of a precipice, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Ethan broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. You know, Karim, life is too short to let opportunities pass by. Don't you think? Karim turned to face him, his hazel eyes meeting Ethan's piercing green ones. I've built my life on seizing opportunities, he said, his tone calm but charged. But this is different. Sophia stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against Karim's. Different isn't always bad, she said softly, her voice carrying an inviting warmth. Sometimes it's exactly what we need. Karim's breath hitched as her fingers intertwined with his. The contact was electric, yet it felt natural, as though it had been building to this moment all along. He glanced at Ethan, who watched with an unreadable expression, steady, curious, and unflinching. "Are you comfortable?" Ethan asked, his tone surprisingly gentle. Karim hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I am. I don't usually do this." Sophia smiled, her eyes sparkling in the dim light. "Neither do we," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But with you, it feels right." The honesty in her words caught Karim off guard, and he found himself letting go of the apprehension he'd been holding on to. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within him. Ethan stepped closer, placing a hand on Karim's shoulder. The touch was firm, grounding him in the moment. "Now, we stop overthinking and just let it happen." Back inside, the penthouse felt warmer, more intimate. The energy between them had shifted, each movement charged with a deeper meaning. Ethan poured them all another drink, his casual demeanor masking the gravity of what was unfolding. Sophia guided Karim to the sofa, sitting close enough that their legs brushed together. The three of them talked for what felt like hours, their conversations weaving between playful banter and heartfelt confessions. Karim found himself sharing more than he ever had with anyone: his struggles with loneliness, the pressures of running an empire, and the void he couldn't seem to fill despite his success. Ethan and Sophia listened intently, their expressions open and empathetic. At one point, Ethan leaned forward, his green eyes locking onto Karim's. "You don't have to carry all of that alone, you know." Karim's chest tightened at the words, the vulnerability in Ethan's tone striking a chord deep within him. "It's not easy to let people in," he admitted, "especially when you're used to being the one in control." Sophia reached for his hand, her touch gentle but reassuring. "You don't have to be in control all the time, Karim," she said softly. "Sometimes it's okay to let go." For the first time in years, Karim felt a glimmer of hope, an inkling that perhaps he didn't have to navigate his life alone. The walls he had built around himself seemed to crumble, piece by piece, under the weight of their kindness. As the night stretched into the early hours, the lines between them blurred further. Karim's usual restraint gave way to an unfamiliar sense of freedom. The connection he felt with Ethan and Sophia was unlike anything he had experienced before: intense, intoxicating, and undeniably real. Ethan's voice broke through Karim's thoughts. "We're not asking you to make a decision tonight," he said, his tone calm but serious. "But if you're open to it, we'd like to explore this together." Karim met Ethan's gaze, then turned to Sophia, whose expression mirrored her husband's sincerity. He knew that this wasn't a casual invitation. It was a leap into uncharted territory. Yet for the first time in years, the prospect of the unknown didn't scare him. It excited him. "I don't know where this will lead," Karim said finally, his voice steady, "but I'm willing to find out." A shared smile passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the step they were all taking together. The night ended with quiet laughter, gentle touches, and a sense of possibility that Karim hadn't felt in years. But even as he drifted to sleep in the guest room, his mind couldn't shake the thought that every choice came with a cost, and this one might change everything. The following days were a whirlwind for Karim. He returned to his penthouse overlooking Central Park, but the quiet luxury of his home felt hollow compared to the vibrant energy he'd experienced with Ethan and Sophia. Their connection had awakened something in him, something he couldn't ignore. Yet as much as he wanted to dive headfirst into this newfound bond, his rational mind wouldn't let him forget the complexities involved. At work, Karim was as composed as ever. His assistants flitted in and out of his office, presenting reports and updates, but he barely registered their words. His thoughts were consumed by Ethan's calm confidence and Sophia's magnetic warmth. For the first time in years, he found himself checking his phone obsessively, hoping for a message from either of them. It came one evening, just as he was pouring himself a glass of wine. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a short message. "Dinner at our place tomorrow? Let us know." Karim smiled to himself, feeling a flicker of excitement. He replied with a simple, "I'll be there," and spent the rest of the evening trying to suppress the anticipation that bubbled within him. The next evening, Karim found himself once again at Ethan and Sophia's penthouse. The atmosphere felt different this time, warmer, more familiar. Sophia greeted him at the door, her auburn hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She wore a casual yet elegant outfit, a deep blue blouse and tailored pants that accentuated her graceful frame. "Karim," she said, her voice light with excitement. "Come in. Ethan's in the kitchen, trying not to burn dinner." Karim chuckled as he stepped inside, taking in the cozy ambiance. The lighting was softer than before, and a faint scent of rosemary and garlic wafted through the air. He followed Sophia into the living area, where Ethan was indeed in the kitchen, wearing an apron over his casual sweater and jeans. "Karim," Ethan called, flashing his easy grin. "Hope you're hungry. I may have gone overboard." "I'm intrigued," Karim replied, his tone playful. "Didn't take you for a chef." Ethan shrugged. "Sophia taught me. She's the real expert, but I can hold my own." The dinner was intimate and filled with laughter. Over wine and homemade pasta, they shared stories about their lives, Karim's rise to success, Ethan's entrepreneurial journey, and Sophia's background in art and design. The easy flow of conversation made Karim feel as though he had known them for years. After dinner, they moved to the balcony, where a cool breeze swept through the space. Ethan poured another round of drinks while Sophia leaned against the railing, her green eyes fixed on the glittering cityscape. "It's funny," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You spend your life chasing what you think will make you happy, only to realize it's the little moments like this that truly matter." Karim stepped closer, the weight of her words settling over him. "I think that's why I've always felt so disconnected," he admitted. "I've built this life, but it never feels like it's mine." Ethan joined them, handing Karim a glass. "Maybe it's because you've been chasing what others expect of you, not what you want for yourself." Karim looked at him, surprised by the insight. "And how do you know what you want?" Ethan's smile was small but sincere. "You don't always know. Sometimes you just have to trust what feels right." Sophia reached out, her hand brushing Karim's arm. "And does this feel right to you?" Karim's chest tightened as he met her gaze, then Ethan's. "It does," he said quietly, the truth of his words surprising even himself. The moment lingered, heavy with unspoken possibilities. But before they could say more, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table behind them. He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read the message. Sophia's expression mirrored his concern as she leaned over to glance at the screen. "What is it?" Karim asked, sensing the shift in their demeanor. Ethan hesitated before responding. "Just something from work. Nothing to worry about." But Karim could tell there was more to it. The easy warmth of the evening had been replaced by a subtle tension, And though Ethan and Sophia tried to mask it, the crack in their facade was impossible to ignore. As the night wore on, Karim couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. Something that could unravel everything they had built together. The warmth and laughter of the evening at Ethan and Sophia's penthouse stayed with Karim as he returned to his own home. But as the hours passed, the memory of Ethan's sudden change in demeanor began to nag at him. He replayed the moment in his mind. The brief exchange between Ethan and Sophia after the text message. The tension in their eyes they tried so hard to hide. Something wasn't right. The following day, Karim buried himself in work, trying to distract himself from his unease. His meetings were efficient, his decisions swift, but his thoughts always wandered back to them. By evening, he couldn't resist the pull any longer. He texted Ethan. "Is everything okay? You seemed distracted last night." The reply came quickly. "All good, just business stuff. Don't worry about it." But the brevity of the message only deepened Karim's suspicion. A few days later, Ethan invited Karim to join them for a private event at an exclusive gallery. The invitation was casual, almost dismissive, but Karim felt compelled to attend. When he arrived, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit that exuded understated elegance, he found the gallery buzzing with energy. Sophia was in her element, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders as she mingled with the crowd, her radiant smile captivating everyone she spoke to. Ethan, standing near the bar, waved Karim over. "You made it," he said, handing Karim a glass of champagne. His tone was light, but his eyes betrayed a hint of distraction. "Wouldn't miss it," Karim replied, scanning the room. "Sophia seems to be the star of the evening." Ethan smiled, his gaze softening as he looked at his wife. "She always is." The evening was filled with casual conversations and light-hearted moments, but Karim couldn't shake the undercurrent of tension. He noticed how Ethan and Sophia exchanged subtle glances, their smiles just a little too forced when they thought no one was watching. Something was weighing on them, and Karim felt its shadow growing over the connection they had begun to build. Later that night, as the event wound down, Sophia approached Karim on the balcony overlooking the city. Her usual warmth was muted, her green eyes clouded with something he couldn't quite place. "Karim," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, his concern growing. "Do you ever regret letting people in, letting them see parts of you that maybe they shouldn't?" The question caught him off guard. "I think it depends on the person," he said carefully. "But I've learned that regret comes from not taking the chance at all, not from the risk itself." She nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands. "Ethan and we've been through a lot, more than most people know." Karim wanted to press her for more, to understand the weight she was carrying, but before he could, Ethan joined them. His arrival was abrupt, and his expression carried a hint of urgency. "Sophia," he said, his voice firm but calm, "we need to go." Sophia hesitated, glancing between Ethan and Karim. "Is everything okay?" Karim asked, his concern now impossible to hide. Ethan forced a smile. "Just something we need to handle. Don't worry about it." But Karim did worry. As he watched them leave, hand in hand, a knot formed in his chest. The closeness he had begun to cherish now felt fragile, threatened by something he couldn't yet see. That night, as Karim lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he felt the unease settle deeper. Whatever was happening with Ethan and Sophia, it was pulling them away from him, and the thought of losing what they had started to build was unbearable. He resolved to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Karim couldn't ignore the growing distance between him, Ethan, and Sophia. Days turned into weeks, and their once frequent messages became sporadic and short. The weight of uncertainty gnawed at him, and the warmth he had felt in their presence was slowly replaced by cold doubt. One evening, unable to contain his restlessness, Karim decided to visit their penthouse unannounced. It was a bold move, one he would typically avoid, but the bond they had shared felt too meaningful to let slip away without an explanation. The doorman greeted him as usual, and within minutes, Karim was ascending to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, he immediately sensed something was off. The lights in the penthouse were dimmed, and the usual lively energy of the space was absent. He knocked on the door, and after a long pause, Ethan answered. "Karim," Ethan said, his voice a mix of surprise and hesitation. He looked disheveled, a stark contrast to his usual composed appearance. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you both," Karim replied, his tone firm but not accusatory. "You've been distant, and I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong." Ethan opened the door wider, gesturing for Karim to come in. The penthouse was unusually quiet, and Sophia was nowhere in sight. Karim turned to Ethan, his brow furrowed with concern. "Where's Sophia?" Ethan hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "She's resting," he said finally, his tone evasive. "It's been a lot lately." Karim crossed his arms, his patience wearing thin. "Ethan, I've been patient, but I deserve to know what's going on. You and Sophia mean more to me than you realize, and this distance, it's killing me." Ethan's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, Karim saw the cracks in his armor. "You're right," Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "You deserve the truth." Ethan led Karim to the living room, where they sat on opposite ends of the couch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan began, his voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "Sophia and I haven't been honest with you," he said, "about our past, about why we invited you into our lives." Karim's chest tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Go on." Ethan took a deep breath. "Sophia has been dealing with a health condition, something serious. We came to the Velvet Room that night because we wanted to feel alive, to remind ourselves of the joy we used to have before her diagnosis took over our lives." Karim's heart sank. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We didn't want pity," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "We didn't want you to see us as broken or fragile. But the truth is, Sophia's condition is worsening. That's why we've been pulling away. We didn't want to drag you into our pain." Karim leaned forward, his voice firm. "You don't get to make that choice for me. I care about both of you, and if you're going through this, I want to be there for you. You're not a burden to me." Ethan looked at him, his green eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and guilt. "We were scared, Karim. Scared of what this would do to you, to us." Sophia's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "You didn't have to be scared." Both men turned to see her standing in the doorway, wrapped in a loose robe. Her auburn hair was tousled, and she looked pale, but her green eyes still held their familiar warmth. "Sophia," Karim said, rising to his feet, "you should be resting." She shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "I've done enough resting. It's time I faced this." She walked over to them, sitting beside Ethan and taking his hand. "Karim, we've both made mistakes. But the truth is, you've brought us more joy in these past few months than we've felt in years. We're sorry for pushing you away." Karim reached out, placing his hand over theirs. "We'll get through this together," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within him. "Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." As the night went on, they talked openly, sharing fears, hopes, and promises. For the first time, Karim felt a sense of clarity, a purpose greater than himself. But as the clock struck midnight and the city lights glimmered beyond the windows, a lingering unease remained. The road ahead would be far from easy, and the weight of Sophia's condition loomed over them like a storm cloud waiting to break. The following weeks were a blur of hospital visits and quiet evenings. Karim became a constant presence in Ethan and Sophia's lives, offering his strength and unwavering support. The bond they shared deepened, but the shadow of Sophia's illness grew darker. One evening, Sophia asked to sit on the balcony with Karim. The city lights shimmered behind them as she spoke, her voice faint but steady. "You've given me more than I could have ever hoped for," she said, her hand resting lightly on his. "Thank you, Karim, for making me feel alive again." Karim's throat tightened as he struggled to find the words. "I'd do anything for you and Ethan," he said softly. "You've changed my life too." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with both gratitude and resignation. "Promise me you'll look after him," she whispered, "when I'm gone." Karim nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I promise." The day came sooner than any of them had anticipated. Sophia passed peacefully in the early morning, surrounded by Karim and Ethan. The weight of her absence was suffocating, her laughter and warmth now just echoes in their minds. Ethan was inconsolable, retreating into himself. Karim tried to be the pillar of strength, but the grief threatened to overwhelm him too. They clung to each other in the emptiness of the penthouse, their shared pain the only thing keeping them afloat. Late one night, Ethan broke the silence. "I don't know how to go on without her," he admitted, his voice breaking. Karim pulled him into an embrace, holding him tightly. "You don't have to do it alone," Karim said. "We'll get through this, together." Months passed, and the pain softened into a bittersweet ache. Karim and Ethan found solace in each other, their connection deepening as they honored Sophia's memory. They visited her favorite places, shared stories, and built a new kind of life, one rooted in the love she had given them both. One evening, as they sat on the balcony with the city lights twinkling below, Ethan turned to Karim. "She would have wanted this," he said quietly, "for us to find happiness again." Karim nodded, his heart heavy but full of gratitude. "She taught us how to live," he replied, "and I'll never forget her for that." This story reminds us that even in the face of tragedy, love has the power to transform and heal. What would you do to honor the memory of someone you've lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Help us bring more emotional and inspiring stories like this one to life.